Hello, and thank you for clicking on this video. If you're here, then you're likely either a fan of Rob Zombie's version of Halloween, like I am, or you're just curious what I'm cooking up here. If you are a fan of Rob Zombie's Halloween, then you likely at least know there were multiple cuts of the film. The ones you're probably thinking of are likely the theatrical cut and Rob Zombie's director's cut, but very few people know about or have seen the leaked Workprint cut that was leaked when the movie was still in its early drafts. But I am one of the few people who has seen it. I have found this version of the film very fascinating, especially in how, unlike the final versions of the film, this version was firmly focused on Loomis and Michael instead of Laurie and Michael, and I found that very interesting. So I started thinking about what a Halloween 2 following this version's ending would have been like. For those of you who haven't seen it, this version of the 2007 film ended with Loomis finally getting through to Michael and getting him to let Laurie go, standing down and dropping the knife, before he was shockingly gunned down by the trigger-happy cops. Sure, it's implied that Michael dies here, but remember, this is Michael Myers. He could still survive to be the sequel. Remember, the final film's ending had Laurie shooting him in the face point blank. If he can survive that, he can survive this. But before we get into Halloween 2, let's go over what the first film would have been like if this ending were intended to be kept. For the most part, we will be using the unrated director's cut as a base, but with some scenes replaced with the theatrical versions, some deleted scenes put back in to help our narrative, and minor alterations where I feel necessary, like going with Workprint versions of things and stuff like that. We'll start normal, with the beginning of the film being almost the same as in the theatrical and director's cut versions, opening with the quote from Dr. Loomis saying, "The darkest souls are not those which choose to exist within the hell of the abyss, but those which choose to break free from the abyss and move silently among us." Then we have the regular scenes of Michael with his pet rat Elvis, but with the monster mash playing on his radio like in the Workprint version. They did the mash. They did the monster mash. Meanwhile, Ronnie and Deborah are bickering with each other before Ronnie flirts with Judith. Then Judith goes up to bug Michael while he washes up blood off of a scalpel. And as Michael comes down, Ronnie talks shit about him before verbally abusing and threatening him. And you know how that scene goes. Then we get the bathroom scene with Michael being bullied and then sassing the principal to get in trouble. Then we get the scene with Michael in the office with a bit of the deleted scene of Michael's school calling his mom's work being put back in so that the Rabbit and Red Lounge can have a bit more screen time and a look at what the owner is like so that is set up for Halloween 2. Then we get her coming down and meeting the principal and Loomis, seeing the pictures of Michael's cruelty to animals and the bagged up dead cat from his locker, and Loomis talking to Deborah about Michael possibly becoming a psychopath. And as Michael runs out of the school, here is where we get the opening titles and music like in the Workprint version, as Michael slowly and silently stalks his bully before cornering him in the woods and beating him to death with a tree branch. We're doing it this way because I feel the way the Workprint did the opening titles here was more effective than how the final versions did the opening titles. Plus, without the titles being here, it feels like the scene was just playing the Halloween theme for no reason. Then, continuing like normal, we cut back to the Myers home, where Michael and Ronnie are watching The Thing from Another World, while Ronnie mocks Michael about killing animals, while Michael just ignores him with his mask on, calling for Judith that he's gonna be late, before Deborah promises things are gonna be different starting tomorrow, as she calls down Judith to take Michael trick-or-treating while she goes to work. The girl's throwing a couple barbs Ronnie's way while he just flips off Judith and makes threats to Deborah. We have the cute moment where Deborah promises to make everything better, and Michael says her hair looks pretty, before she kisses him and goes out. Deborah is then warning Judith's boyfriend Steven to behave before she leaves, and as soon as she's gone, Judith just goes upstairs with Steven, leaving Michael to just go trick-or-treating by himself. We then get the love-hurt scene like normal, cutting back and forth between Michael sitting by himself on the curb with his candy and Deborah dancing at the strip club. Then everything starts going down. As Judith and Steven sleep together, her boyfriend bringing out the mask to fail at scaring her with, wanting to do it with the mask on. Michael comes back home, eats his candy, and then duct tapes the sleeping Ronnie to his chair before slitting his throat. Then after Steven comes downstairs to make himself a sandwich, Michael beats him to death with an aluminum bat, before coming upstairs to put on the mask, and we get the scene where Michael kills Judith. Then he sits out on the porch with his baby sister Boo, until Deborah comes home, takes the baby from Michael, and demands he answer her what's going on, finally saying, "It's over, Mommy. It's over." And we cut to her losing her mind as the dead bodies are brought out of the house and a news anchor reports live about it, as Michael is sitting in the back of the police cruiser, cold and empty inside, turning to stare at the camera. Smith's Grove, 11 months later. A news reporter goes over how lengthy and expensive Michael's trial was, and how Dr. Loomis attended the trial and will now be appointed to oversee Michael's care while incarcerated at Smith's Grove. We then have Loomis and Michael's first sessions, like in the normal film. Loomis testing out the equipment and Michael introducing himself awkwardly like a normal child. Loomis asking how Michael's feeling today and letting Michael know he can ask the doctor anything he wants. And then Michael asking why Loomis talks funny, making the doctor chuckle. We get the extended version from the Workprint cut of Loomis asking Michael about the night of the murders, with Michael claiming he only remembers the normal parts of the night, none of the violence, and the mention of the event in the woods with the bully included in this version. You remember nothing about getting a knife? I didn't do that. Okay, but you were covered in blood. Whose blood was it? And Michael just comes in, a moment I find very amusing. I would remove any of the clips from the director's cut where Loomis is filming Michael and talking about him like some sort of demon, as that goes against the Workprint characterization of him genuinely caring about and wanting to help Michael. We then cut to Deborah's sweet visit with Michael, and I would use the Workprint of the scene as it is longer, just to hold on the moment for an emotional effect. I would then put back in the deleted scene where Deborah and Loomis are walking outside, talking about letting Michael outside to visit a park or a zoo to have fun, because Deborah thinks it's so horrible inside. Loomis doesn't think it's a very good idea, though he does agree with Deborah that Michael is absolutely not a monster, showing more of that caring side of Loomis. Then I would place here the Workprint version of the session where Michael's showing Loomis the first mask he makes, a black one with a flat nose. I would use this version because the other version includes a bit of Loomis being a smartass, explaining how Michael's favorite color, black, isn't technically a color. I find that to both be unnecessary and detrimental to the character dynamics. Loomis saying it looks good and asking why he made it, Michael cheerfully responding that he has his secrets, Loomis bringing up how he thought they had no secrets. Michael telling him that he'll tell him later, and reminds the doctor that he has questions to ask Michael. Loomis asks if Michael's made any other masks. Michael says a couple. Loomis asking why his hair's getting so messy. Michael saying it's because no one sees him. Loomis disputing this by bringing up himself and Michael's mom. But Michael retorts by playfully asking, "Anybody else?" To which Loomis can only say no. We then would go to the scene of Danny Trejo's character Ishmael mopping outside, asking him how he's doing, telling him not to let the walls get him down because he knows how it feels, and giving him his advice to look beyond the walls and learn to live inside your head, because there's no walls that can stop you there. We then get Deborah's next visit to Michael, where we use the Workprint version of the scene as it has an extra bit at the beginning where Michael asks if he's gonna die of old age here too, his mom telling him no, don't be silly, where he then proceeds to show her his new mask, asking if she likes it. After she asks when he made it, he says the previous day, and that he likes it because it hides his face. But she tells him to take it off because she doesn't like him to hide his face. He says it hides his ugliness. But she tells him to take it off and don't say that. He's not ugly and she doesn't want him to talk like that. They then express how they missed each other, and we cut to Michael and Loomis's next session, which only has one silent shot in the final film, but as an actual proper scene in the deleted scenes. So this is another deleted scene we are putting back in, because it's a Michael and Loomis scene. Loomis introduces Michael to the audio recording as Mike, and Michael corrects him not to do that. Loomis then asks Michael what he imagines when someone says, "the devil." Michael thinks about it for a moment before answering with the words, hollowness, and blackness, and emptiness, explaining it as being because the devil doesn't have anything inside of him. He's empty. Loomis asks if he feels that way, and Michael mulls it over before responding that he does sometimes. Loomis asks when, and Michael just says that when he puts these masks on, he feels like he can hide anywhere and no one will see him. Loomis asks if the masks are important to him and puts one on, asking how he looks, making Michael laugh a bit. Then Loomis hands it to him, letting Michael put it on. Loomis says it looks rather sad. It has a certain pathos to it, with Michael asking what that is, and Loomis briefly explaining. Loomis notices by the end of the session Michael is looking rather sad, and Loomis asks why. Michael just saying he wants his mom to come more. We then cut to the next deleted scene being put back in, where Loomis is walking and talking outside with Deborah that same day, talking about the upcoming board meet every Thursday afternoon, promising to Deborah that he will do what he can to try to get Michael to be allowed outside. As Deborah tries to leave, she's hounded by a reporter trying to ask intrusive questions about Michael, with Ishmael helping her and fending off the rude reporter, who then continues his report alone before we cut to the next scene. It's approaching Christmas time as we can see Loomis walking to the entrance, everywhere covered in snow and decorations as he carries presents. But then we cut, like every version of the film does, straight to the middle of a session where Michael is crashing out, yelling and screaming obscenities and hatred at Loomis, wanting to get out, then crying that he doesn't want to be here, he wants to go home. With Loomis telling him it's alright and trying to comfort him, still firmly telling him he can't go home because he's done terrible things, before pulling the crying child into a hug, telling him it's okay. The next scene is Michael and Loomis having their first outdoor session at a table, still within the grounds of Smith's Grove. Loomis saying he's convinced the suits to let him out in what they call the garden. Well, just barely a garden. Trying to affirm to Michael that he is his friend. Michael's only response is emotionless. I have to get out of here. Being said over and over while Loomis keeps trying to state how he's been Michael's friend since the beginning, and that he's been trying to help him. Mixing the two versions here, as Michael's comments are from the Workprint version, and the unrated version, Loomis goes on to explaining how he feels like a failure, that his reports to the board could lead to him being taken off Michael's case. Finally responds to Michael's repeated statements of, I have to get out of here. Loomis says that's not going to happen for a while. He'll be going nowhere. With Michael's response being his final words for the rest of the film. I have nothing else to say. We then have Michael and Deborah walking together, before she tells him to take off the mask, pulling it up herself, telling him he doesn't look good and he has to eat. In the final film, he tells her to put the mask back on, but here we're going to cut his dialogue so the previous scene has more weight, keeping him silent, leading her just to put it back on him herself, feeling defeated from not getting a response, telling him to come on, at least try to enjoy the day. And then we have Deborah's final visit with Michael, where the three of them just sit there in the cafeteria in silence the whole time with calming music in the background. Deborah hands Michael a photo of him and Boo that she found. She thought he'd like it and would want to hang it up in his room. That was actually able to get his attention for a moment, as she leaves it on the table for him while he continues moping silently. She kisses him on the head as she starts to walk out with Loomis. Loomis asking Nurse Wynn to sit with Michael until he returns. She then goes to sit with him, picking up the photo and looking at it, before saying rudely, Cute baby. Couldn't be related to you. With a smirk as Michael glares at her, grabbing a fork while she's turned around reading a paper. Loomis is out in the hall telling Deborah how Michael's been silent for 2 weeks almost now, suggesting they might want to consider shock treatment. Now we as viewers are like, what? Now I know that sounds bad. But consider this scene takes place in the 90s, where that was still considered normal. Cutting back to Michael, using the Workprint version, where he slowly walks his way around to the nurse menacingly, before he stabs her in the neck with the fork violently. Using this version as it's more intimidating and less abrupt, making it feel more thought through, more like a predator. The alarms start blaring and security run down the hall, causing Loomis and Deborah to be startled and start to follow them. The guards rush in and restrain Michael, who is standing over the bloody corpse of the nurse. As Deborah and Loomis run in to see everything, Deborah runs over to pull the mask off Michael, as we see him roar like a wild animal at her while all we hear is the alarms playing, her having a horrified reaction before we cut away. Deborah's at home, watching old home movies and her and Michael, trying to remember the good times, realizing her baby boy's gone, crying she doesn't want to go on like this anymore. As she grabs a revolver, sticks it in her mouth, and we cut away before I get demonetized. 15 years later. We have the Workprint version of the scene where we get that annoying redneck guard talking to Ishmael, trying to act like some kind of alpha male, being like, I don't work for you, and I'm my own boss. With Ishmael not really caring because he retires in about 3 months, and this redneck is still gonna be here for a long time when Ishmael's gone. Cutting out the redneck's racist comment from the unrated version as, it's not needed, he's easy to hate as it is, and we need to make more time for the things that matter. And he's not gonna really matter at all here. Because the upper staff are involved, we are including the bit from the Workprint version where a reporter is covering current events with the sanitarium, and the people in charge saying they don't see a positive outcome for Michael in this transfer case. Then cutting back to Ishmael and the redneck heading into Michael's room to collect him for his hearing. We see Michael making a new mask, while the redneck reaches to one of the masks on the wall to take a closer look, as Ishmael snaps at him not to touch Michael's stuff, with the redneck being an ass about it. We then cut to the news, where one of the staff says Michael's case has been a tax on an overburdened system. showing where their priorities lie. Ishmael apologizes about having to put chains on Michael, and the redneck continues to berate him about it, with Ishmael saying he's been taking care of Michael for 15 years, and they got something between them. The redneck then threatens Michael like an idiot before we cut to another of the staff on TV proclaiming himself to be a man of change, but not in this case, and that Michael must spend the rest of his life behind bars. We then have the deleted scene version of Michael's hearing, where while Ishmael and the redneck are walking Michael to his hearing, the redneck talking shit the whole time, we keep cutting back to the upper staff at the hearing room, discussing bad coffee and dumb sexual stories about rednecks and demeaning women and gorillas, showing how much of a shit show the management at this place really is. Then we get to the actual hearing, where it's discussed Loomis couldn't be here due to a prior engagement, one of the staff passing on his written evaluation to the others. One of the staff begins arguing that Michael has been in a mental state of regression since the age of 10 and is now free of any recurring violent tendencies, with the other staff member getting a jab at him by suggesting that he thinks Charles Manson is cured then, joking that maybe Charles should come and run a daycare center. He's upset that Loomis isn't here, and is even more so when the first staff member suggests Michael should be transferred to a minimum security facility. This staff member affirms that Michael is a maximum security psycho, and his transfer is ultimately denied. We then cut to Loomis's final session with Michael, where Michael is simply sitting there, handcuffed to a chair, but Loomis doesn't know what else to say, and goes on that Michael hasn't said a word for 15 years, calling it a lifetime, joking that it's nearly twice as long as his first marriage, then saying it's strange, but Michael in a weird way has become like his best friend. Laughing and saying it just shows how fucked up Loomis's life is. Then saying he's done all he possibly can for Michael. He's given him everything. He's sorry. It tells Michael not to be upset, but this is going to be Loomis's last day. He has to move on, and he's sorry. Getting up and walking away, telling Michael, take care. It made no sense for the final film to put Loomis's book presentation as the immediate next scene, so we will save it for later like in the Workprint. Now, because the Workprint and director's cut version of Michael's escape was absolutely horrible, having two annoying redneck staff members be absolutely stupid and decide to take a female inmate, bring her into Michael's room, and do horrible things to her right there, mess with his stuff, and leave the door wide open, we are going with the theatrical version of this escape, because not only did the other version have that horrible, unnecessary brutality involving three characters who had no point and no purpose to the story, it also robbed Michael of his agency by having his escape be because of someone else's stupidity. Now, anyway, we cut to the nighttime at Smith's Grove. A bunch of guards are sitting around complaining about being holed up here so late, having to move Michael to another room tonight, sitting around joking and eating donuts while they get ready. The armed guards have Michael chained up and start escorting him down the halls, until they come to a security door where one of the guards unlocks it and pushes Michael through, before he stands there for a bit, waiting for the last door to be unlocked before he breaks his chains and starts slaughtering all the guards with his strength and brute force. Next, we have a deleted scene, where we see a couple more guards just sitting around the security office, watching old movies, eating snacks and chatting. The other guard going to go get coffee and snacks, while Michael is using the dead guard's keys to set all the other inmates free. He then comes to the security office, where he kills one guard while the other's just watching TV, not noticing him until he comes up to him. The guard nonchalantly walking up to Michael to try to talk him back to his room, before Michael tosses him through a window. Michael then easily makes his way out, walking away from Smith's Grove forever while the alarms blare. I cut out Ishmael's death scene because I have other plans for him. Michael then walks all the way to a truck wash where a big semi is pulling in, and out steps Joe Grizzly, heading to the bathroom to admire himself and then take a shit while looking at nudie mags. Michael then starts a fight with him and wrecks the place as he kills him before taking his coveralls and boots and walking away, heading on his way to Haddonfield as we slowly fade to the town on the morning of October 31st. We see the Strode family discussing stuff from around town before Laurie starts getting her mom riled up with lewd humor, being shouted at to stop! Laurie heads outside, with her dad thanking her for going to drop off some documents at the old Myers house and reminding her how important it is, and they say their goodbyes. This part of the movie is mostly the same as normal. Tommy Doyle runs up to his babysitter Laurie to start talking at her about supernatural stuff he's a fan of, and she jokes around with him on their way to the Myers house. We then cut to Michael coming home, going down and taking off his asylum mask, and starting to break apart the floorboards till he digs out his murder knife from 15 years ago, and then pulling out his true mask, then putting it on. He then starts to overhear Laurie and Tommy outside as he heads to the front door to look out and spy on them. Tommy warns Laurie that it's the devil's house and the boogeyman's gonna get her, with her teasing him about it as she drops the mail and the documents in the mail slot. Michael then oddly sniffing the mail for some reason as the other two leave. Now we finally cut to Loomis's presentation for his book, The Devil's Eyes, where he's discussing how internal and external factors culminated in a perfect storm that made Michael Myers turn out the way he did, poetically going on about Michael's eyes being the eyes of a psychopath, describing the present-day Michael Myers as a deceptive monster in many similar ways to how the original Dr. Loomis from the '78 film would have. We then add in a deleted scene where afterward, Dr. Loomis is signing people's copies of his book and answering people's questions. One person asking him if he agrees with the theory that psychopaths are rational beings completely aware of what they're doing, but he dismisses their question, telling them that it's before lunch and she should lighten up. And another person asks about his theory on nurture versus nature, where he cheerfully responds that she will find that answer in his book. I would cut the lines where he strokes his ego about how good his book is, as it hurts his character, but then we have the scene end where he says they should break for lunch. Then we have the scene where Laurie, Annie, and Linda are discussing their plans for the night, while Laurie looks out the window to see Michael next to a tree stalking her, like in the '78 original film, before vanishing at the end of the scene. We then cut to our next deleted scene being added back in, with two of the upper staff members at Smith's Grove having drama, and I'm going to add a bit in here where Ishmael is getting chewed out, because as the only person who was nice to Michael and looked out for him, they would likely assume he had something to do with Michael's escape, while we cut to Loomis leaving for lunch like he said, complaining to his agent about how he feels like he was boring everyone to death, while thanking his agent for booking him there anyway, cutting down a few bits of their conversation to save on time and keep relevancy on topic. As Loomis receives a call from Smith's Grove, them chiding him for not answering their calls all morning, and him responding he refused to be a slave to technology and turns off his phone while he's working, before they cut him off and tell him Michael's out. Loomis getting upset and telling them to keep it under wraps as long as possible to prevent panic and hysteria, saying he'll be there in 2 hours. I do hope at least some of you get why I'm putting these deleted scenes back in for our narrative. Next, we have the scene of Laurie and Linda walking out of school, talking about Linda's suspension from Cheer Squad, with Linda then being a bitch to the people around them. Make me wonder why Laurie is friends with her, as she tries to undo the damage Linda was doing, before they continue talking. Linda talking shit about people from the school and bragging about how she's got her dad totally wrapped around her finger, before Annie joins them and jokes with them as they walk for a while, before we see Michael stalking them from a distance. Them noticing and harassing him about it, and making lewd jokes about it, threatening to call Annie's dad the sheriff. Laurie chastises them that he could have been dangerous, and Linda teases her some more before Annie's dad pulls up and they have a quick chat with him before they break off and Laurie walks across the street to her house, Michael still watching Laurie from a distance. Next we have the scene where Loomis is back at Smith's Grove watching the security footage of Michael's escape and he chews the boss out, saying it's his fault and he's responsible. But the boss deflects, saying he can't be responsible for everything that goes on here, and that Loomis asks the staff member who earlier in the film argued for Michael's transfer about his responsibility, who then deflects too, saying not to pin this on him, saying Michael was Loomis's patient, and Loomis emphasizes the was my patient. It says all they had to do was play zookeeper, just keep the monkey house locked until the monkey died of old age. How hard was that? The boss then retorts that if their security wasn't sufficient, Loomis should have warned them, who argues that he warned everyone, and that no one listened. The transfer staff wanting members then says that you could barely hear Michael breathing half the time. He's been like a comatose kitty for 15 years. The boss adding on that no one could have predicted this. Loomis getting mad and asking if they're just going to wash their hands of this thing. They make him sick. He is mad that trusts the tameness of a wolf, is the quote he gives us as he walks out of the room. As they follow him outside, they tell him they've given the authorities his complete profile. He retorts that 2 roadblocks and an all-points bulletin wouldn't stop a 5-year-old, and they ask what he wants them to do. He replies that he wants them to get on the phone, and he wants them to tell the authorities who broke out of here last night, to tell them exactly where he's going. The boss complains that they don't know where he's going, but Loomis says that it must be great living in denial. He must try it sometime. Loomis then says that the boss and his army of shirt tuckers must know exactly where he's going. The dumbass asks where that is, and Loomis bluntly answers, Haddonfield! Driving away as the boss complains that Haddonfield is 100 miles away from here. Cut to a deleted scene at the Haddonfield cemetery, because I do enjoy this scene, where the caretaker of the cemetery pulls up in his truck with his dog to see Michael trying to walk off with Judith's tombstone. The redneck caretaker yelling and shouting at Michael for him to stop it, threatening and insulting Michael as he walks up to him, finally causing Michael to suddenly turn and face him, startling the caretaker as Michael makes a gesture that made me laugh. A gesture that makes it feel like Michael's going, "What? You want some of this?" As the scared caretaker crawls backwards on the ground away from the approaching shape. Michael then grabs him by the neck and starts lifting him up off the ground, strangling him to death, watching the life leave his eyes before dropping him. As we cut to Loomis driving while trying desperately to reach Sheriff Brockett by phone, to no avail as he drives to a gun store while Michael lifts the headstone, and we fade to the next scene. Now, one thing to note between cuts is that in the Workprint cut, the night starts with the Laurie and her parents scene, while in the final film, the night starts with the Bob and Linda scene. I'm not sure why this swap was made, but I feel it flows better if we go with the Workprint order. So the important kills take place after Laurie leaves to go babysit, like in the 78 original, because after Laurie leaves the safety of home, that is when Michael should begin his nightly killing spree, I feel. So starting off the night, we see Laurie helping her parents pass out candy to trick-or-treaters, while Michael watches, before her dad gives her a warning about nutcases on Halloween night, before Annie comes to pick up Laurie for them to go to their kids they're babysitting. And after Annie and Laurie are gone, Michael storms up to her home, catching her dad by surprise and slitting his throat before dragging his body inside, for his wife to see and scream before she feebly attempts to fight him off and he brutally kills her. Next we could have the deleted scene where Loomis meets with the deputy and Sheriff Brackett at the cemetery, introducing himself as Brackett recognizes him because Brackett bought his book, pointing out Loomis's quote from the book that was used to open the movie. It says it sounds to him like Loomis is hunting for the Antichrist. Loomis replies that perhaps he is, and Brackett says he is currently up to his ass in bullshit, asking him to just drop by his office tomorrow and they can discuss their situation with a clear head, promising he will make him cappuccino as Loomis cuts him off, saying he would be happy to sit down and have coffee with him, but he doesn't think the sheriff understands what's going on here. Death has come to your little town, Sheriff, is what Loomis says, and the sheriff sighs and says that it's Halloween. He's got every shit stain in this town trying to make his life as difficult as they possibly can. He's got a caretaker that's gone AWOL, a grave that's been desecrated, and Loomis cuts him off, asking, whose grave? Brackett says they don't know, the headstone's missing, and that they go over and try to read the map to figure out whose it was, before finding it was Judith Myers. Loomis proclaims that he knew it, and the sheriff questions what he means, and Loomis says, he's come home. Up next we could finally have the Bob and Linda scene. Michael watches as Linda and Bob drive up to his house, and then as they smoke and drink and fuck in the bedroom. When Bob heads down to the van to get more beers, Michael pushes him in and stabs him to death while Linda starts talking on the phone with Laurie. After her phone call, Michael walks up to the doorway wearing a bedsheet of Bob's glasses, pretending to be him, as Linda laughs and flashes him, asking for the beer, which Michael lets her take from his hand, before she says one too many insults to him, and while she has her back turned, he takes off the disguise and starts strangling her. And we then see him carrying her corpse away before we cut to Tommy and Laurie, with a small scene of him asking her if the boogeyman's real. She asks why he's so obsessed, and they discuss the things he's heard about the boogeyman, with her teasing him about it before Annie calls up, while we hear Michael's breathing. Michael's stalking Annie, as Laurie and Annie discuss the rest of their plans for the night, including the plan to come over soon, before she hangs up and Laurie teases Tommy about liking Lindsay Wallace. We then see Michael standing behind the sofa Lindsay's laying on, both of them watching the thing from another world, before he hears Annie say they're going to go see Tommy, and Michael leaves, as Annie comes in for the two girls to sass each other before they head out over to Tommy's house, with Michael following them from a distance. Annie brings Lindsay in and teases Tommy before the kids go watch a movie. And Annie talks to Laurie about setting her up with Ben Tramer, saying Laurie needs a boyfriend, to which Laurie protests before they joke around about it and mock Ben Tramer. They hear a car horn as Annie goes out to be picked up by her boyfriend, Paul. I'm placing the scenes in this order to feel like we're appropriately cutting back and forth between the right characters at the right times. Next, we are cutting back to Brackett and Loomis at the station. Loomis is snapping at the sheriff that he has to stop thinking that we're dealing with a normal man here. I'd cut the line about Michael being a soulless killing machine, but keep the line about him being driven by soul animal instinct. More character stuff I'm trying to do. Brackett brings up that he has read his book and that he knows who he is, saying that he doesn't like him. He is then going to tell him something else. He thinks Loomis has created quite the masterpiece of a monster off of the blood of this town, because monsters sell books. Loomis is angry, saying that's a hell of an accusation. How dare he say that? Loomis apologizes and says, let's just start again, asking him to look at the photograph on the cover. Talking about how when he first met Michael 17 years ago, he was a sweet, charming little boy, but he had nothing inside. There was something missing. He has no conscience, no reason, not even a rudimentary sense of life or death, right or wrong. He's come back for his baby sister, and that Loomis knows it in his bones. But he doesn't know to do what. But it's not good. Brackett says that if he must break a promise that he made a long time ago, then Loomis must play Razor, and he means razor straight with him. Loomis understanding. Brackett calls up the Strode residents, just getting their answering machine. It obvious to us why they can't answer, but not to Brackett, leaving them a message pleading them to pick up because he needs to talk to them. After waiting too long, he gets up and says, let's go. We're going to skip the scene where the kids and Laurie are watching The Screaming Skull and talk about the boogeyman more, because the things they say about it aren't really plot relevant. But we do cut to Michael watching Paul making out with a topless Annie, before he yanks Paul off of her and kills him with a single stab, throwing him across the room before he chases a screaming Annie and pulls her back inside as she tried to run outside, shutting the door before she runs to the kitchen and grabs a knife to defend herself, only to get pip-slapped to the floor. As she lays there trying to crawl away, Michael just watches her for a minute before dragging her back to another room to start stabbing her off-screen. We will then cut to the scene of Laurie's conversation with Lindsay about getting her jacket because it's time for her to take her home, with a light bit of teasing back and forth. I'm also going to remove the scene of Loomis and Brackett in the cruiser where Brackett talks about how he responded to the 911 call about Deborah and finding the baby Boo, because we could already infer most of what happened from earlier scenes, and will save us some runtime. We continue with Laurie walking Lindsay home while talking about Tommy liking Lindsay, before they walk into Lindsay's house, finding Paul's hanging corpse with a jack-o'-lantern on his head, as Lindsay screams and Laurie finds Annie on the floor, all bloody and covered in stab wounds. She screams at Lindsay to go call the police, and the little girl runs out screaming for help, while Laurie cries over Annie. Laurie then crawls away to go call the police, as Michael shuts the door he was hiding behind. Laurie dials 911 and starts telling the operator she needs an ambulance and about what happened, while Michael admires his handiwork with Paul's body. Annie starts to try to call out to Laurie to warn her while she's on the phone. Now we finally cut back to Brackett and Loomis, Brackett responding to the police radio. Brackett asks what's going on, only to be told there was a stabbing victim being found by Laurie Strode. Loomis screaming that he's found her, asking her how long it's going to take to get there. Brackett saying 10 minutes as he performs an emergency U-turn. Cut back to Annie crying out for Laurie, and Laurie still on the phone before Michael pulls her away from it to face him. She backs away before turning to run, coming to the locked door and having to break it down with a chair to escape while Michael follows her. She runs screaming to Tommy's house while he just slowly follows her, never far behind. As she bangs on the door screaming, Tommy finally comes down to let her in just in time for her to shut and lock the door in Michael's face. Him bumping into the door, scaring the kids up the stairs before he kicks the door in as the police sirens are heard and Laurie runs up with the kids to hide in the bathroom. The cops enter the house looking for any signs of anyone. As one of the officers is sent to check upstairs, another is checking the downstairs. The upstairs officer knocks on the bathroom door, asking if they are all right, and they scream that he's out there to please help them. He asks them to unlock the door, And Laurie starts to go to unlock it, asking if he's gone, and the officer says that there's no one out there. The kid's telling her not to do it, before Michael pins the cop and stabs him against the door, making everyone scream as he breaks through the door. Another officer coming out yelling at him to freeze. Michael just starts aggressively approaching him as the cop fires a round at his shoulder. Michael just taking it as he keeps going. Michael then stabs the cop to death while we hear Laurie and the kids screaming. Michael then turns around and comes back to them and takes Laurie, carrying her out, kicking and screaming before she just seems to faint in his arms. We then see him walk out the door and down the street, just carrying her away. Then the sheriff's cruiser finally pulls up to Lindsay's house, Brackett telling Loomis to stay behind him as they go in. Brackett then finds his daughter on the floor, trying to comfort her as she cries. And I would add a line for Brackett saying he's going to kill that son bitch and nobody can stop him. Then Loomis runs out shouting and signaling for the ambulance before the kids start running up to him and he meets with them. The kids tell him that the boogeyman took Laurie, and he tells them to go stand by the ambulance and not to move, as he runs off to deal with Michael. Laurie then wakes up in his shed, seeing Linda's dead body under Judith's tombstone, crawling over and crying for her to please wake up, pleading desperately, while Michael just watches, slowly walking up, making Laurie scared. She asks who he is and what he wants, and she gets more scared when she sees the knife, asking him not to hurt her. And he drops the knife, getting on his knees next to her, bringing out the photo of him as a kid with her as a baby, but she doesn't recognize either of them, saying she doesn't understand and pleading with him to please let her go. She then slowly eyes up the knife and takes the photo, leading to him taking off his mask to show her his face. She keeps eyeing the knife and says she just wants to help him, before she grabs it and stabs him in the shoulder. Then she gets up and runs, trying to find some way out, slamming against the chains and padlocks on any exit, before ripping the boards off the windows, all while Michael's recovering. She gets out and shakes the fence, screaming for help as Michael takes the knife out of his shoulder, puts his mask back on, and starts following her again. As she tears away through the fence and starts to escape, as he breaks through the boards and starts reaching out for her, grabbing at her and scratching her a bit as she squeezes her way out of the place, starting to limp away before tripping into an empty pool. Michael slowly approaching as she lays there, crying and pleading, screaming for somebody to help as he slowly walks around the pool, staring at her. She starts to crawl away, scratching at the wall and sliding back down as he walks toward her, continuing to scream as Loomis finally arrives. "Michael, stop!" he says pleadingly, trying to reach out that it's him, Samuel. But Michael just turns away from him and back to Laurie. "Michael, please stop!" he pleads out as he fires a shot in his shoulder. "Stop, Michael!" He then fires at the other shoulder. "Stop!" He shoots at his back, finally causing Michael to stop approaching Laurie and collapse to the ground. Loomis then goes down to Laurie and helps her up, telling her it's all right and that she's safe. "It's okay," he says as she clings to him and cries as he leads her away, holstering his gun, bringing her to the car as he puts his coat on her. Michael just lying face down in the empty pool as Laurie is brought into the car, Loomis walking around to the driver's side. Loomis looks around, making sure the coast is clear, before getting inside, saying it's over. Still crying, Laurie asks if that was the boogeyman. He says that, as a matter of fact, he does believe it was, before Michael's arm bursts through the window and he starts dragging Laurie out. Loomis yelling, "Michael, no!" begging him to stop. "Please!" Loomis pleading with Michael that it's not her fault. It's Loomis's fault. Loomis is the one who failed him, pleading with him to let her go. Saying this plea twice and again affirming that it was he who failed him, before the police arrive. All the police are immediately drawing their weapons, and Brackett yells at Michael to drop his weapon. Loomis yelling no, and for them to stop. Brackett repeating for him to drop his weapon and get down on the ground. But we all know he has no intention of letting Michael live. Loomis shouts for them to cool it, and that he can handle this. Brackett angrily says for Loomis to get out of the way. But the doctor just ignores him, the sheriff cursing and signaling for his officers to wait. Samuel then talks softly to Michael, pleading for him to give Laurie to him, saying to please let her go, pleading from the bottom of his very soul. Laurie also pleading for him to please let her go. But Michael knows how this is going to end. He knows the cops are just going to shoot him no matter what he does. Loomis needs to see what Michael sees. Loomis is too naive. As Michael stands there, though, he thinks back to memories of her as a baby and lets her go. She runs into Loomis's arms, who tells Michael he did the right thing, as he stands there and slowly drops his knife. But as soon as Loomis turns around with Laurie and starts walking away, bang! The police start opening fire on Michael, peppering him with a dozen bullets while Loomis is screaming for them to stop, before Michael finally falls backwards, looking completely dead. As Loomis kneels over his body and weeps for him. As the camera focuses on Michael's face, it slowly pulls back. We hear the recording of Loomis and Michael's first session before fading to credits. The song Love Hurts getting a reprise here. And that's the end of this first part. Thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for something rewritten from the ground up, with nowhere near as much resemblance to the original film. This timeline's version of Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. If you liked this video, please make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you next time. Buttons, buttons, buttons.